My name is Elspeth McRae, and I am 32 years old. Tonight, I am not standing in a gilded ballroom, a high-tech laboratory, or a sterile corporate office. I am standing in the center of the clan gathering hall, in the village of Glenfinnan, a cold, drafty stone building, where the very air feels like it has been trapped since the Jacobite risings of 1745. Fiona is the modern face of the McRae legacy, the woman who has just signed a €12 million contract with a conglomerate in Paris. She claims she discovered a revolutionary way to stabilize the colors of wild heather using innovative green chemistry. She knows it's a lie. She knows she stole the rare Fioran fungus fermentation recipe from my private journals, the one I spent a decade cultivating on the north face of Ben Nevis. She also knows that she failed to understand the complex organic stabilizing mordant, replacing it with a toxic, cheap, chromium-based fixative that is currently turning our ancestral stream into a dead zone, killing the very soil she claims to protect. The room falls into a sudden, expectant silence as the head elder of the Weavers' Guild, a man as ancient and weathered as a lightning-struck oak, stands up. His name is Alistair, and his word is law in this valley. Kinsmen, neighbors, and guests from across the sea, the elder begins, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that seems to resonate from the very foundation of the hall. The McRae name has been the warp and the weft of this valley since the days when the kings walked the heather. Tonight, we celebrate McRae's eldest, Fiona, for bringing our heritage out of the mist and onto the world stage. She has done what many thought impossible, made the old ways profitable for the new world. He gestures to Fiona, who flashes a rehearsed, porcelain smile that is as sharp as a weaving needle. She twirls her diamond-encrusted bracelet, a signing bonus from her Parisian masters, looking like a queen who has just conquered a wilderness. She knows I found the dead trout in the sacred spring this morning. She knows I have the chemical report from the university. And she knows that tonight, she will be officially named the Protector of the Glen, giving her the legal power to sell our family's communal grazing lands for a massive, toxic industrial development project disguised as an eco-resort. But the elder's voice suddenly shifts, taking on the cold, sharp edge of a highland frost. The loom does not lie, and the earth does not hide its pain forever, and it is with a shattered heart that I must address a rot in the thread. My fellow weaver, McRae McRae, has presented irrefutable evidence of a betrayal that cuts deeper than any dirk. Her younger daughter, Elspeth, out of a jealous, dark madness for her sister's fame, has been found guilty of contaminating the McRae dye vats with industrial bleach. She attempted to destroy the royal fleece and frame her sister for environmental crimes to stop this merger and ruin our village's prosperity. I feel the breath leave my lungs as if I've been plunged into the freezing, lightless waters of the loch. My head spins, the orange candlelight turning into jagged streaks of fire against the dark stone walls. Every person in that room, men who taught me to shear my first sheep, women who shared bread with my father during the hard winters of my childhood, turns toward me with a collective, razor-edged disgust. I am no longer a weaver. I am a blight on the land. I am an infection that must be purged to save the body. Therefore, the elder booms, the sound echoing through the timber rafters like a death knell. I will not let the McRae name be tarnished by such malice. Who agrees that Elspeth McRae is hereby stripped of her guild membership, her inheritance of the family looms, and her right to ever touch a spindle in this valley again? Who agrees she is banished from the glen, to be forgotten as the mist on the hills? Hands rise. It is a slow, rhythmic tide of rejection that feels like an avalanche burying me alive. It begins with the Council of Elders, then the farmers who are eager for the development money, then the distant cousins. 1, 50, 200. The betrayal is total. The rejection is absolute. I look at McRae, my mother. She is draped in a new, silk-lined shawl, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, refusing to acknowledge the existence of the daughter who stayed to nurse her through the long months of the fever years while Fiona was in London spending our father's life insurance. She slowly raises her hand, her movements deliberate and cold, like a judge signing a death warrant. That is the moment the last thread of my heart snaps. The atmosphere is heavy, thick with the suffocating scent of smoldering peat smoke, the oily lanolin of raw, wet wool, and the bitter, metallic tang of an approaching Arctic winter. Outside, the Scottish Highlands are a dark, jagged sea of frozen heather and shifting mist. But inside, under the flickering, orange light of wrought iron chandeliers, the air is pressurized with the suffocating weight of a 1,000-year-old judgment. The betrayal smells of wood ash, old wool, and the bitter, sharp tang of my own pride being ground into the dirt. You've been a ghost in that potting shed for 30 years, Elspeth. Mary's voice rings out across the hall, devoid of any maternal warmth. Now, the ghost is exorcised. Go to the city. Go to the gutter. You are nothing but a broken spindle to us. Leave. Now. I stand there, a dark figure in a room of golden light, feeling the rejection like a physical weight on my shoulders. I thought I had reached the end of my life. I thought I was being buried in the soil of my ancestors, but I was wrong. Because 30 seconds later, the massive oak and iron doors of the hall groan as they are pushed open against the howling wind. A blast of freezing sleet sweeps into the room, extinguishing the candles near the entrance and bringing with it the raw, untamed scent of the mountain. A woman no one has seen in 7 years walks in. She is wearing a mud-splattered field jacket and carrying a heavy, soil-covered crate marked with international safety seals. Dr. Isla Vance, the world's leading environmental toxicologist and the direct descendant of the clan that was exiled during the Highland clearances, the only person who knew that my father's mad theories about the mineral content of our water were actually advanced geology. She doesn't look at the shocked crowd. She doesn't look at Fiona. She looks only at me. The earth doesn't forget, Elspeth, she says, her voice a clear, ringing bell that cuts through the peat smoke. And the water is about to testify. The storm has arrived, and it's time to see whose thread is made of wool and whose is made of poison. To understand how I became a ghost in my own valley, you have to understand the McRae cottage. We didn't live in a house. We lived in a rigid hierarchy of utility. Growing up, McRae meant learning that beauty was for public consumption, and labor was for the invisible. Fiona is 3 years older than me. From the second she could walk on the uneven grass of the Highlands, McRae declared her the face of the new clan. Fiona was the sun, the golden girl who could perform traditional dances at the Highland Games even when she was faking an injury to get out of the grueling shearing season. She had the charisma of a mountain breeze, refreshing but hollow, and the technical depth of a shallow, sun-dried puddle. My mother turned our parlor into a gallery for Fiona. Every original design she had me draw for her in the middle of the night. Every complex geometric pattern I had calculated on graph paper while she was out at the pubs in Fort William was framed in expensive driftwood and shown to the buyers from Edinburgh and London. There was no room for me in that light. I was the shadow that made his shine possible. And me? I was the girl who spent her teens in the bogs, obsessed with the cold, hard logic of natural chemistry and the hidden biology of the glen. I didn't go to university in the city. I went to the mountainside. I learned the silent language of the lichens, the way they took 100 years to grow a single inch of brilliant orange pigment. I became the only person in the country who could successfully extract the royal blue from the wild woad without using modern pollutants. I finished my apprenticeship under the stars, living on oatcakes and sleeping in a stone shepherd's shieling because my mother cut off my dinner, calling my interest in archaic, useless bog weaving a commercial waste of the family's strategic time. I remember the day I finished my masterwork, a tapestry of the Glenfinnan Valley so detailed, woven with such complex optical blending of 16 shades of green and gray, that it seemed to change color with the passing of the sun, just like the hills themselves. It was a feat of artistry and chemistry that should have made me the head of the guild. I brought it to my mother in the parlor, my heart thumping against my ribs with a hope I refused to let die. I thought, surely this is the bridge. Surely she will finally see that I am the one who holds the soul of the McRae legacy. She didn't even put down her fashion magazine. She didn't even touch the weave to feel the softness of the hand-spun wool that had cost me my sleep and the skin on my palms. She glanced at the colors, let out a puff of dismissive, cold air, and set her dirty, mud-caked garden trowel directly on the center of the tapestry. I can feel the draft crawling across the stone floor like a physical presence, biting at my ankles, but it is nothing compared to the frost in the eyes of my own kin. The walls, lined with the faded tartans of a dozen fallen lines, seemed to close in on me, whispering of a heritage I am about to be stripped of. I watched in agonizing, microscopic detail as the damp, black peat from the tool seeped into the delicate fibers, staining the royal blue I had spent 6 grueling months extracting. She looked up at me, her eyes bored and dismissive, and said, "Natural dyes? What are you going to do, Elspeth? Sell blankets to the hippies at the train station? We are a luxury brand now. Fiona is the future. Go to the dye pit. Fiona's production team needs someone to scrub the calcium scales off the vats. Don't speak unless the fire goes out. That was the day I officially became a ghost. My kingdom was the mist shed, a windowless, stone-walled hut at the far edge of our property, where the air smelled of wet earth, boiling lichen, and the sharp, biting heat of the drying racks. I built my own secret corner in that shed, using discarded looms I found in the village junk pile, creating fabrics so light they felt like woven air, yet so strong they could stop a highland gale. I became a master of the invisible, creating the foundation for a glory I would never share. While the rest of the world looked at McRae and Fiona on the covers of Highland Life and Eco Chic, I was living in a stone hut. I was the one who actually designed the Highland Ember collection that saved our company from bankruptcy 2 years ago. I was the one who figured out that the secret to the inner glow of the wool was a specific type of volcanic ash found only at the base of the secret waterfall. I was the one who stayed up for 72 hours straight when the wool began to felt in the unusual summer heat, manually respinning the yarn while Fiona was at a cocktail party in Glasgow, pretending she knew how a loom worked. McRae never once stepped into the mist shed when it was raining. She never saw the thousands of pages of journals I wrote to map the seasonal variations of the glen's colors, the deep moss of March, the bleeding heather of August. To her, I was the help. Fiona would laugh during guild meetings, leaning back in her chair, and say, "She's a servant, not an artist." Last New Year's Eve, as the family toasted with $1,000 a bottle champagne provided by the French investors, Fiona smirked at me over the rim of her glass. "Elspeth, you look like a bog body. When was the last time you saw a sun that wasn't through a cloud of steam? You should try hacking yourself a personality, or at least a coat that doesn't smell of sheep fat. You're bringing down the aesthetic of the clan. We have a reputation to maintain, and your naturalness is becoming an embarrassment." I just sipped my well water and looked at the mountain. I knew something they didn't. I knew that the Fiona pink dye they were marketing as purely organic was a disaster of heavy metals. I knew that Fiona had been secretly dumping the toxic chemical runoff mercury and chromium fixatives into the sacred spring that fed the entire village's water supply. She was killing the land to save a few euros on production. I knew the soil was turning acidic, and I knew that I had hidden an indicator thread inside the final weave of the royal tweed, a special thread made of pH-sensitive lichen extract that would change from brilliant gold to deathly black the moment it touched the polluted water of the spring. I stayed silent because of Dr. Isla Vance. She had sent me an encrypted message from her lab in Edinburgh months ago. "Elspeth, the McRae name is a brand, but the water is a witness. Let them weave their web of lies. When the first autumn rain hits the fabric, the truth will bleed. Be the weaver of mist. Keep the samples. Wait for the storm to break." 3 years ago, the first storm arrived. And tonight, at the Golden Fleece ceremony, the rain is finally starting to fall, and the threads are beginning to tremble. The first real crack in the McRae facade appeared 3 years ago. During the week, the village experienced its worst drought in a century. The heat was relentless, turning the lush green of the glen into a brittle, golden husk. At exactly 3:14 a.m., the hour when the ghosts of the Highlands are said to walk, the silence of the glen was shattered by a sound I will never forget: the death rattle of the sacred spring. Tonight is the night of the Golden Fleece, a sacred ceremony held once a decade to honor the master weaver who will provide the official Harris tweed for the royal estates and the high fashion houses of Europe. To the tourists who flock to our glen, this is a charming pastoral folk tradition, but to the 300 weavers, sheep farmers, and the predatory representatives from Paris luxury brands sitting on the heavy oak benches, this is a blood sport. Fiona, in her desperate, greed-fueled attempt to fulfill a massive order for a London department store, had bypassed my slow-curing natural vats. She had imported 5 tons of synthetic heather base from a factory in the east, a chemical slurry that smelled like a dying city. But she didn't know how to neutralize the runoff. In her panic to hide the waste, she had ordered her workers to dig a hidden trench that led directly into the limestone aquifers of the spring. I was in the mist shed when the smell hit me, not the earthy, comforting scent of wet wool, but the sharp, acrid, chemical stench of burning plastic and ozone. I ran to the spring and saw the water turning a sickly, neon purple. The ancient moss, which had grown for centuries, was shriveling and turning black before my eyes. The trout were floating on the surface, their silver scales dulled by the poison. Elspeth, fix it. Fiona screamed when I found her standing by the trench, her designer boots ruined by the toxic sludge. She looked like a cornered animal, her prestige crumbling in the moonlight. The environmental inspectors are coming in 2 days. If they find this, the contract is dead. Dad's reputation will be ruined. I'll be ruined. My mother, McRae, appeared at the edge of the woods, her silk robe billowing like a ghost. She looked at me, her face a mask of cold, calculated desperation that chilled me more than the mountain air. She grabbed my wrists, her grip like iron bands, her fingernails digging into my skin. Elspeth, please, your father's debt to the bank. He gambled more than we told you. This contract is the only way we keep the cottage. You have to save the spring. You're the only one who knows the chemistry of the earth. Her voice broke, a masterful performance of a mother in pain. But you must promise me you can never tell the village you fixed it. Fiona has already told the press that she is the one who purified the valley with her new methods. If they find out the mad daughter saved us, the brand is worthless. Investors buy dreams, Elspeth, not technicians. Let Fiona be the savior. For the sake of your father's name, for the sake of your home. That was the ultimate betrayal. My own mother was asking me to lobotomize my own success, to hand my genius over to a thief who had spent her life mocking my dirtiness and my obsolescence, just so she could keep her social status and her silk cushions. My mother was willing to let me be a ghost forever if it meant her favorite daughter could be a star. And, because I was still desperate for a scrap of her love, still hoping that one day she would look at me and see a daughter, I did it. I stayed up for 96 consecutive hours, working in the dark, using my knowledge of natural filtration and volcanic silicates to neutralize the chromium and the lead. I used the mountain itself to filter out the sins of my sister. I saved the spring. I saved the McRae name. And then, I watched from the shadows as Fiona stood before the village council and took a medal for her heroic environmental intervention. She accepted the applause with a straight face, while I sat in the dirt, my lungs burning from the fumes of the chemicals I had neutralized. The next morning, Fiona sent me a text from her new SUV. Nice work, Bograt. Now get back to your hut. If you ever say a word about that trench, I'll tell the elder you were the one who poisoned the water in a jealous fit. And we both know who the village will believe, the successful designer or the freak who talks to moss. But Fiona, in her infinite, arrogant stupidity, didn't realize that a weaver doesn't just make cloth. We record history in every knot. We weave the truth into the very fabric of existence. Inside that royal tweed, she was so proud of the one meant for the Queen's summer residence, I had embedded the indicator thread. I had also kept a jar of the neon purple sludge, sealed with a wax stamp of my father's signet ring, and a soil sample from the trench. I wasn't just fixing a spring. I was documenting a funeral for their lives. Back to the gathering hall. The Scottish wind is howling so loudly it sounds like 1,000 ghosts playing a lament on the pipes. The silence is deafening, heavy with the weight of my mother's public rejection. McRae has just called me a broken spindle, a phrase my father used for scrap wood. Fiona is smirking, already imagining the luxury apartment she'll buy in Paris with the money from the grazing land sale. They are currently raising their crystal glasses to the visionary sustainability of my older sister, Fiona McRae. They call her the savior of the Highland looms, the bridge between ancient craft and modern ethics. But as I look at my own hands stained a deep, permanent amber by the juices of bog myrtle and scarred by the boiling lye of the dye vats, I know the terrifying truth. The village men are moving toward me, their faces grim, ready to escort me to the edge of the glen like a leper. And then Dr. Isla Vance opens the crate. She doesn't waste time with the elders. She walks straight to the central oak table, her mud-caked boots leaving a trail of dark, honest earth on the polished wood. She pushes Fiona aside with a look of pure, academic contempt that makes my sister flinch. Elders of Glenfinnan. Isla's voice booms, amplified by the hall's perfect stone acoustics. You are sitting inside a monument of lies. Fiona McRae didn't save your valley. She's the one who's been poisoning it. She's been feeding you dreams while she feeds the earth mercury. Isla, you're a disgraced academic. You have no standing here. Get out. McRae screams, her face turning a dangerous shade of gray. Guards, remove this intruder before she ruins our future. The village men who are actual shepherds, men who have seen the strange, weeping rashes on their sheep for 3 years, don't move. They stand at attention, looking at the crate. They have been waiting for someone to explain why their lives were getting harder while the McRaes got richer. Isla pulls out a simple glass beaker filled with water. This water, she says, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper, was taken from the sacred spring 5 minutes ago. And this? She grabs the golden fleece tapestry from the table, the one Fiona claimed was perfectly organic and blessed by the mountain, is the product of McRae flora. Fiona says this cloth is the soul of the highlands. Isla roars, her voice reaching every corner of the rafters. Let's see how the soul reacts to its own water. She pours the spring water over the brilliant gold weave. The 300 people in the hall gasp in unison. A horrified, collective sound that ripples through the rafters like a wave. The gold thread doesn't just get wet, it reacts. In a matter of seconds, the beautiful, sun-colored weave begins to turn a deathly, bruised black. The indicator thread I had hidden in the pattern is reacting to the high levels of chromium and synthetic acid Fiona had been dumping into the spring. The chemical reaction is violent, a literal black stain spreading across the pride of the clan. The word poison, woven in the ancient Ogham script of the Celts, a script I had taught myself while hiding in the shieling, begins to emerge in stark, undeniable black across the center of the royal cloth. It is a message from the land, written in the language of the ancestors. It's a trick! She's a witch! She used a chemical projector! Fiona screams, her voice high and shrill, the sound of a fraud who has run out of thread. She lunges for the beaker, intent on smashing it, but Isla catches her by the wrist and holds her there with a grip of steel. Then, the final blow. Isla pulls out a small, battery-powered recorder. It isn't a digital file that can be hacked. It's an old-fashioned tape. She presses play. The voice of our mother, McRae, fills the hall, echoing off the stones. It is her voice from 3 years ago, sobbing in the mist shed. Elspeth, you must let Fiona take the credit. She is the face of the brand. If the village knows she poisoned the spring, we lose the cottage. Let her be the hero for us. You were always the one who could endure the dark. The room goes as cold as a mountain grave in midwinter. The elders look at McRae. The farmers look at Fiona. McRae covers her face and collapses onto the stone floor, her silk shawl trailing in the dirt. The McRae legacy hasn't just been exposed. It has been unraveled, thread by agonizing thread. And now, Isla says. She flips the tapestry. There, hidden under the silk lining where only a master would look, is a microscopic, hand-stitched portrait of a girl with dirt on her face, holding a spindle like a sword. Below it, the text in Gaelic, Concept, Chemistry, and Weave by Elspeth McRae. I didn't destroy your brand, Mother, I say, stepping forward for the first time, my voice steady as the granite hills themselves. I no longer feel like a ghost. I feel like the mountain. I am the brand. You wanted a star, so you ignored the daughter who was actually keeping the light alive. You chose the poison over the wool. Well, your star is a poisoner, and the Weaver of Mist is finished being a ghost. The golden fleece, draped across the central table, glowing with a synthetic radiance that mimics the sun on a summer lock, is woven with the stolen threads of my silence and the slow poisoned blood of the land itself. I stand near the back of the hall, leaning my weight against a cold granite pillar that feels like it's leaning back against me. The Scottish Environmental Protection Agency, SEPA officers, whom I had alerted months ago with the samples of the purple sludge and the signet-sealed jars, step out from the shadows of the pillars. They don't go for Isla. They go from McRae and Fiona. Fiona McRae, you're under arrest for environmental sabotage, criminal negligence, and the illegal dumping of heavy metals into a protected waterway. McRae, you are being detained for questioning regarding corporate fraud and the concealment of environmental crimes. Fiona is led out in handcuffs, her neon pink suit looking like a neon sign for her own guilt. McRae is left sitting in the dirt of the hall floor, clutching the black-stained wool, her eyes vacant. Elspeth, why? She whispers, her voice a raspy thread that barely carries. Why would you kill the family name? We were so close to the top. Because the name was built on my silence and the death of the valley. Mother, I say, looking at the mud-stained tapestry in my mind. You chose the prophet. I chose the glen. And in this valley, the earth always remembers its own. I am no longer your broken spindle. I am the storm. The fallout was not an explosion. It was a slow, agonizing unraveling of a legacy that had been woven with lies for 30 years. That night, the gathering hall became a crime scene. By morning, McRae Tweed was not just bankrupt, it was a global pariah. The Paris fashion houses issued a joint statement denouncing the brand. And the modern McRae line was pulled from every shelf in the world within 24 hours. They didn't want the stench of poison on their runways. To pay the millions in environmental fines and the class action lawsuits from the village farmers whose sheep had died and whose children had fallen ill, McRae had to sign over everything. The McRae cottage, the house where my father was born, where he taught me to love the heather, was seized by the state to pay for the massive cleaning project of the spring. I watched on the local news from my small workshop as a crew in white hazmat suits carried out the looms my grandfather had built, labeling them as evidence of contamination. It was the most painful thing I had ever seen, the tools of my ancestors being treated like toxic waste. McRae was not jailed, but she was broken. She was moved into a small, government-funded room in a gray, concrete housing estate in Fort William, far from the hills and the mist. She called me every single night for a month, her voice losing its edge and becoming thin, sharp, and utterly desperate. "Elspeth, please," she would whisper into the receiver, the sound of a cheap electric heater clicking in the background. "Your sister is in a cell in Edinburgh. She can't breathe in there. She's losing her mind. You're a famous consultant now. Your firm, the Weaver of Mist, is worth millions to the eco-textile world. Buy back the cottage, Elspeth. Use your influence to save your sister's lawyers. She's your blood. You can't let her rot." I sat in my new studio, looking out at the mountains of sky, and I remembered her trowel crushing my royal blue tapestry. I remembered her nails digging into my skin while the trout died in the spring. "Mother," I said, my voice as firm as a double knot. I spent 30 years being the unfortunate daughter for a family that viewed me as a tool to be used and discarded. I'm not the tool anymore. I'm the weaver, and I don't build homes for people who only let me exist in a stone shed. You chose the star over the daughter. You chose the poison over the wool. Now you have to live with the man you protected. I've already sent a check to a trust that will cover your food and heating for the next decade. That is all the blood I have left for you. The pattern is finished. I never answered her calls again. I realized that some people don't want to be saved. They just want to be comfortable while you drown to keep them afloat. Fiona was eventually sentenced to 7 years. I didn't visit. The thread was cut. Today, I sit in my own studio on the high cliffs of the Isle of Skye. My company is simply called the Weaver of Mist. We don't use chromium. We don't use machine slurries. We build the most advanced, environmentally sentient fabrics in the world, fabrics that are built on the bedrock of organic truth and the chemistry of the earth. My name isn't on a neon sign in a city. It doesn't need to be. My name is in the fact that the water in my glen is clear enough to drink again. I am no longer invisible. I am no longer the bog rat. My fingers instinctively trace the rough, uneven surface of the wool cloak I spent 4 months spinning by hand, a weave of basalt gray and storm cloud purple. My father, Hamish, used to whisper to me that the land gives us our colors, but only the patient can find them. He taught me that a true McRae doesn't just weave wool. We weave the history of the rocks and the water. When I walk into a meeting at the Royal Society of Arts or a private commission for a world leader who actually cares about the planet, the room goes silent. They don't ask me to scrub the vats or count the spindles. They wait for my approval. They ask for my expert signature on their sustainability charters. They know that without the Weaver of Mist's mark, their promises are just empty threads. On the center wall of my office, framed in ancient peat oak from the bottom of a bog, is that mud-stained tapestry my mother tried to ruin 10 years ago. I never cleaned the peat off. In fact, I think the black mud stain makes the royal blue look even deeper, even more resilient. It is my favorite artifact. It reminds me that the marks people try to leave on you to diminish you, the insults, the erasure, the mud-caked dismissals don't define your worth. They are just the background. It's the beauty you create around and above those marks that matters. That stain isn't a symbol of my mother's hatred anymore. It's a trophy of my endurance. It's the point of origin for my freedom. 6 months ago, McRae showed up in the lobby of my building. She hadn't made an appointment. She sat there for 7 hours, wearing an old, frayed coat that smelled of damp wool and cheap tobacco. She looked like a woman who had spent every night of the last year being haunted by the ghosts of the land she betrayed. When I finally went down to see her, the glass elevators whispering against the stone walls, She stood up, her legs shaky. She held out a small, wooden box. Inside was my father's silver signet ring, the one item she had managed to hide from the bailiffs by sewing it into her mattress. "Elspeth," she whispered, her voice a raspy thread that barely reached me. "I was wrong. I was blind. I'm starting a small knitting circle. Just me and 2 old widows in the social housing. We're making socks for the shelter. Real work. No chemicals. I need your mind. I need my daughter. Please, take the ring. It was always meant for the real McRae heir. Let's rebuild the name together. I'll give you 51% of the new venture. I'll put your name first. Elspeth and Myrie McRae. Doesn't that sound right?" I looked at the ring, a beautiful, cold piece of silver that had been used as a weight to buy my silence and my sister's lies. It was a relic of a dead time. Then I looked at the woman who had called me a broken spindle and a shadow. "I don't need a ring to tell me who my father was, Mother," I said, my voice echoing in the vast, light-filled lobby I had designed. "And I don't need your recognition to know I'm a McRae. I've already built my own name, and unlike yours, mine isn't built on poison and betrayal. Keep the ring. Sell it. Use the money to buy a better heater for your room. I've already paid my debt to you with 30 years of silence. The ledger is closed. There is no McRae name to rebuild. There is only the truth. And the truth is, you're late for the shearing." I turned around and walked back to the elevators. I didn't look back to see if she was crying. I didn't look back to see her slump into the designer chair like a discarded scrap of wool. I didn't look back at all. I've learned a lesson that no weaving pattern, no matter how complex, could ever teach. Boundaries are not walls that keep people out. They are the threads that you get to weave into your own life. You get to decide who is worthy of entering your pattern. And more importantly, you get to decide when it's time to cut the thread and walk away for good. You are not a spindle for someone else's ambition. You are the architect of the whole cloth. My name is Elspeth McRae. I am a weaver. I am a scientist. And for the first time in my life, I am not a ghost haunting the shed of someone else's fragile empire. I am the one holding the loom. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of a boundary you've been afraid to set, or a truth you've been hiding to protect people who don't deserve your silence, please hit like and subscribe. You are not a broken spindle. You are the architect of your own truth. Speak up. The world is waiting to hear your voice. And I promise you, the view from the top of the mountain is worth every single agonizing step of the climb. I'm Elspeth, but Hamish has been in a grave on the windswept hillside for 5 years, and my mother, Myrie, is the one standing on the stage now. Myrie doesn't see a daughter when her eyes sweep across the hall. She sees a shadow on the mountain, a girl whom she claims smells too much like the earth and talks too little to be profitable. And tonight, for the first time in 32 years, I'm going to sleep soundly. To Mary, I am a biological tool, a ghost whose only purpose is to maintain the machinery of her ambition, while Fiona provides the face for the cameras and the smiles for the investors. I am the grease in the gears of a legacy that no longer values the oil. Fiona stands next to her, wearing a sleek, machine-perfect suit of tweed that glows with an unnerving, neon pink hue, a color that does not exist in nature, regardless of how many wild heather stories she tells the press.